Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here, former federal prosecutor, former Army JAG. So we are about 48 hours out now from Bill Barr's attempt to tank the case, dismiss the guilty plea against Mike Flynn. And I've had some time to think about it, and I would say this move by Bill Barr is perhaps the most transparently corrupt, politically motivated abuse of the criminal justice system in the modern era. Now, what do we know about Mike Flynn and why Mike Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI? Well, first of all, we know that back in January of 2017, Mike Flynn got caught talking dirty to the Russians on the phone, talking about sanctions. He had no business having those conversations with the Russians. We also know that the vice president asked him about those conversations, and he lied to the vice president. We know that the FBI then interviewed Mike Flynn about those conversations, and he lied to the FBI. We then know Mike Flynn subsequently walked into federal district court in Washington, D.C., into Judge Emmet Sullivan's courtroom, raised his right hand, swore that he would tell the truth to Judge Sullivan, and told the judge, "I lied to the FBI. I knew lying to the FBI was a crime. I have no defense. I was not entrapped. I'm pleading guilty knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily because, Judge Sullivan, I am guilty." That, in a nutshell, is what we know about Mike Flynn lying to the FBI, lying to the vice president, and stating under oath in Judge Sullivan's courtroom that he was, in fact, guilty of making a false statement to the FBI. So, a couple of days ago, we have the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, whose name is Tim Shea. He's a Bill Barr acolyte that was installed there back in January to do Bill Barr and Donald Trump's dirty work. He files a motion, a 20-page motion that is pure and utter garbage. And he argues that Mike Flynn's case ought to be dismissed because, among other things, Mike Flynn didn't really lie, and, we didn't really have an investigation up and running at the time. Maybe it was still technically open, but it was almost over. And even if Mike Flynn did lie, it wasn't really material. It wasn't relevant or important to anything we were investigating. These are the claims made in the Tim Shea authored 20-page garbage motion to dismiss Mike Flynn's case. Now, do Tim Shea's claims hold water? Well, there's one easy way to tell. Let's look at the transcript of Mike Flynn's guilty plea. There is a document called Statement of the Offense that sets out the evidence supporting Mike Flynn's guilty plea, that lays out what Mike Flynn did that constituted the crime. This statement of the offense is signed by Mike Flynn under the penalties of perjury, affirming the truth and accuracy of everything in it. This statement of offense is signed, the paperwork is signed by all of the Mueller prosecutors. This paperwork is signed by all of Mike Flynn's defense attorneys at the time, and this paperwork is offered to Judge Sullivan in support of Michael Flynn's guilty plea. And it says, among other things, and I quote, "The defendant, Michael T. Flynn, National Security Advisor to the President, made materially false statements and omissions during an interview with the FBI on January 24th, 2017 in Washington, D.C. At the time of the interview, the FBI had an open investigation into the government of Russia's efforts to interfere in our 2016 presidential election. Flynn's false statements and omissions impeded and otherwise had a material impact on the FBI investigation, signed under the penalties of perjury by Mike Flynn, signed by all of the Mueller team prosecutors, signed by all of Mike Flynn's defense attorneys, and offered to Judge Emmet Sullivan in support of Mike Flynn's guilty plea. And folks, when you walk into federal court and you want to plead guilty, it's not a light, easy, breezy affair. I was in court for some of the proceedings in Mike Flynn's case, and I've been in court over the past 30 years for countless guilty pleas. Among other things, the judge has to be satisfied that the defendant is pleading guilty with a factual basis. That means there's actual evidence supporting his guilty plea. That was proved by Mike Flynn and others to Judge Sullivan's satisfaction. The judge has to satisfy himself that the defendant is pleading guilty knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. And Mike Flynn was, and Judge Emmet Sullivan was satisfied. The judge has to be satisfied that there are no legal defenses in the case. Mike Flynn said there are no legal defenses. In fact, he said, I was not entrapped by the FBI. So, if you don't take Mike Flynn's word for his guilt, or all of the Mueller team prosecutors' word, or the word of all Mike Flynn's defense attorneys, or the conclusion of Judge Emmet Sullivan, maybe you'll take the word of the President of the United States when he said in a tweet, quote, I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the Vice President and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. Boy, there's a rare moment of truth and candor from Donald Trump. He got caught telling the truth. And if you don't take the word of all of those people, how about the Vice President when he went on Face the Nation and said, I quote, what I know is General Flynn lied to me. And now Bill Barr, through his lackey U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Tim Shea, is trying to get rid of, tank, dismiss Mike Flynn's case and his guilty plea. You know, there's always a little bit of silver lining, even though it's hard to see around the big pitch black cloud that is Bill Barr. The silver lining is Judge Emmet Sullivan, a man I had the honor of appearing before when I was a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. I've said it before, Emmet Sullivan is a lion. He's fiercely independent. He is strong. And more than anything else, I've seen firsthand how he will not tolerate governmental misconduct. And this is, we have the zenith, the epitome of governmental misconduct by Bill Barr and Tim Shea. They filed a motion to dismiss Mike Flynn's case, but Judge Emmet Sullivan gets to rule on that motion. I will not predict exactly what Judge Sullivan will do, but there are a few things he could do, including ordering a hearing on the motion and demanding answers from the government, from the prosecutor, from Bill Barr. I do think Judge Sullivan will order a hearing on this motion rather than just assist Bill Barr and Tim Shea in doing the injustice that is represented by dismissing Mike Flynn's guilty plea. If he orders a hearing, some prosecutor will have to appear. Well, guess what? There is only one prosecutor who was willing to sign that dismissal motion. The team of prosecutors who had been handling Mike Flynn's case didn't sign it. In fact, we reported that one of the prosecutors, Brandon Van Grack, who had been on the Mueller team and was handling the Flynn case together with others, he resigned from the case before this motion was filed. In fact, the day of the motion. So the only person whose name appears on the dismissal motion, it's not even a prosecutor, it's this interim U.S. attorney, Bill Barr's acolyte, Tim Shea. So I presume he will be the one who has to appear and explain the Department of Justice's conduct, behavior, and rationale in this case. It could also be that, and I can't say this without smirking, Judge Emmet Sullivan might order Bill Barr to appear and explain his conduct and his rationale. I don't know if he will or not, but he could. After Judge Sullivan has developed the record and is in possession of all of the evidence and information he believes he needs to rule on this unjust motion to dismiss, he'll have a decision to make. He can certainly grant the motion to dismiss, as would ordinarily be the case when the government moves to dismiss something, or he could deny the motion. He could decide it's not in the interest of justice, but rather it is entirely unjust and unfair and politically motivated, and the worst kind of cronyism by Bill Barr's Department of Justice. He could deny the motion, and he could proceed to sentencing, and then he could sentence Mike Flynn. If he grants the motion to dismiss, let's look for a little bit more of that silver lining, folks. There's always hope. There's always hope, and justice is coming. The other little bit of silver lining is that if the case gets dismissed, it will be dismissed without prejudice. What does that mean? A case can be dismissed either with prejudice or without prejudice. If it's dismissed with prejudice, that means that case can never be brought. And that's a dramatic step that rarely happens. If the case is dismissed without prejudice, that means that come January, when, yes, we once again have a law-abiding president, and yes, we once again have a law-enforcing attorney general, whoever he or she may be, the Mike Flynn prosecution can be rebrought in court, should be rebrought in court, and must be rebrought in court. And not just the one charge of lying to the FBI, but he can be charged with all of the crimes that he committed that were dealt away as part of this plea agreement. So let's hang on to that silver lining, folks. I know it's dark, and it's always darkest before the dawn, and it has never been darker in America than it is at this moment. Not that this is America's greatest travesty and greatest injustice. That, I suggest, was back during the time of slavery. However, this is the most politically motivated abuse of the criminal justice system, to dole out a favor to a president's friend that I have ever seen, and I think that we have ever seen in the modern era. But we have an election coming up in November, and we need to save our country. We need to save our Department of Justice and the 110 or 115,000 employees there who are still doing the hard work of the American people, notwithstanding the rot at the top that is Bill Barr. So we got to get out and vote, folks. We got to get out and vote. Please stay safe. Please stay coronavirus free. And I look forward to catching up with you all again soon.